ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
Namaskar. Good afternoon to all of you. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you all to today's Vimarsh talk by Admiral Kumar ji on a very important topic, and which is the national security challenges in the maritime domain. Vimarsh, as you know, is a flagship public lecture program of the Vivekananda International Foundation. And we began it almost 15 years ago, and it has gone on uninterrupted, practically about once a month we do that. And of course, there was some gap during the COVID years. And I think we were calculating about 132 programs we have already done. And we have also brought out a book of some selected Vimarsh lectures, which is also available, and you're all welcome to have a copy of that. So, sir, thank you very much for joining us today and accepting our invitation. It's a very special occasion. Some of the most prominent thinkers have participated in this program, and this is a public lecture, so some serious discussions take place at this forum. And we have had the pleasure of welcoming some years ago the CDS, the three chiefs, and several other experts. So you're joining us today and talking to us about national security challenges in the maritime domain is something that we look forward to hearing. So the warmest greeting from the VIF. Just a brief introduction to the illustrious speaker. Of course, he needs no introduction, but suffice to say that he has had a illustrious and distinguished career in the Indian Navy, and now he helms the Indian Navy, whose profile, as you know, is growing in the region and also globally. And it is an inflection point for the development of our maritime capabilities. Government is spending a lot of resources. In that, of course, the Indian Navy is playing an extremely important role, and he's helming that great institution at this critical moment. Admiral Hari Kumar became the Chief of the Naval Staff in November 2021. Prior to taking over as Chief, he was the Flag Officer Commanding-in-Chief of Western Naval Command. He was commissioned into the Indian Navy on 1st January 1983, and he has specialized in gunnery. Admiral Hari Kumar has commanded several ships, notable being INS Virat, INS Ranveer, INS Kora, INS Nishank, and Coast Guard ship C-01. His ashore appointments include Command Gunnery Officer at Headquarters Western Naval Command, Naval Advisor to the Government of Seychelles, and Training Commander of INS Dronacharya. His flag appointments include Commander of Naval War College at Goa, and that's the first time I had met him. Flag Officer Sea Training, Flag Officer Commanding Western Fleet, Chief of Staff Western Naval Command, and CISC at Headquarters IDS. Admiral Hari Kumar has also served in the UN mission in Somalia. He has attended the US Naval Staff course at Naval War College, Army Higher Command course at AWC Mau, and Royal College of Defence Studies, London. His MPhil from Mumbai University and PG Diploma in Shipping Management from Narottam Murarji Institute of Shipping, Mumbai. Friends, the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war has triggered many changes in the international environment. New power equations are being formed. The world is getting increasingly fragmented. The growing schism between US and China, between Russia and US, Russia and Europe, is redefining the geopolitical environment. The coming together of Russia and China, the role of China in bringing together Saudi Arabia and Iran very recently, the unending conflict in Europe are some of the factors which will impact India's national security. The G20 presidency, at the G20 presidency, India recently faced the challenge of ensuring the integrity of the G20 process. So we have to think deeply about these changes. The recent joint statement of the Quad ministerial meeting in New Delhi is indicative of the growing salience of security issues in the Indo-Pacific and also in the Quad agenda. Besides making an explicit reference to the conflict in Ukraine, it talked about the challenges to the maritime rule-based order, including in the South and East China Sea. It expressed serious concerns at the militarization of disputed features, the dangerous use of Coast Guard vessels and maritime militia. It also referred to the maritime security concerns of the Pacific Islands. The emergence of AUKUS in the Indo-Pacific has created a new situation in the region. The Taiwan Strait remains tense as China watches closely the implications of the Ukraine conflict. The modernization of Chinese Navy and its growing profile presents a serious problem for India's national security. The Indo-Pacific is now a critical priority in India's defense and foreign policies. China's growing profile in the Indian Ocean, its Belt and Road Initiative, will have direct impact on our security. Clearly, India cannot remain unaffected by these developments. To ensure its security, it will have to adopt a carefully considered multi-pronged strategy. We have to have a multifaceted approach in dealing with China, building our maritime capabilities, strengthening the Indian Navy, and strengthening the continental security are equally important. Equally important is fostering integration in the Indian armed forces. We will also have to find resources for the modernization of our forces and building self-reliance in armament, arms production, and defense technologies. Admiral Hari Kumar, as Naval Chief and as a key player in India's national security apparatus, is well versed with these issues, and it will be a great pleasure listening to him on some of these issues. So, Admiral Hari Kumar, thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Arvind Gupta ji, Director, Vivekananda International Foundation, eminent thinkers, academicians, researchers, officers, distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, good evening to all of you. And at the outset, I'm grateful to the VIF for this opportunity to come and meet and interact and get to know what the VIF does. The first time I'm interacting with the VIF, I had not even seen this building earlier. I'm quite amazed and really impressed by the institution and the work it does. I was fortunate to receive a copy of the Vimarsh, which I just started going through, and I found very interesting articles in it. And for a blue-collar practitioner, I would say, like me, it's indeed a challenging proposition, therefore, to deliver a talk to such thought leaders who are present here, who are continuously engaged in strategic discourse at this academically enriched atmosphere of PIF. So when I first saw the topic, I was tempted to sort of reword it or rephrase it as national security challenges of maritime India. It's because I now see telltale signs of increasing maritime consciousness in our country, be it some of the key articulations by Honorable Prime Minister, such as Sagar, Security and Growth for All in the region, or IPOI, the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, be it the conduct of the open debate on maritime security at the UN by India as the chair of the UNSC in August 2021, or be it the National Security Advisor Shri Ajit Doval's assertion that maritime security has gained its rightful prominence in India's security discourse as well as international outreach. Be it initiatives such as impetus to the blue economy, promulgation of a maritime vision 2030, or the recent hike in the Navy's share of the defense budget to 18.26%, the highest in the last 2 decades. All this, to my mind, points to a mindset of harnessing the seas for strategic, diplomatic, military, and economic gains towards our national prosperity and growth. So, I feel that the maritime character of our nation is now shaping our overall outlook and probably is gaining the recognition that it deserves. So, suffice to say, the interplay between maritime security and India's prosperity is becoming probably more clearer to the policymakers and the people of India. Thus, maritime India is on the rise, and the tides of time demand that we grab this opportunity to sail out in these high waters. I would quote Shakespeare in Julius Caesar, where Brutus talked to Cassius thus. He says, "There is a tide in the affairs of men, which, when taken at the flood, leads to fortune. Omitted, all the voyage of the life is bound in shallows and in miseries. On such a full sea are we now afloat, and we must take the current when it serves or lose our ventures," unquote. So this is probably the time when we need to grab the opportunity to harness the blue economy, what the oceans have to offer, and use it to our advantage for the prosperity of our nation. So maritime India, however, is not a function of the Navy alone, but rather it's a national effort, it's a collective effort. It spans the government, policymakers, the national security agencies, maritime security agencies, seafarers, shipping, shipbuilding, industry, the fishing community, energy agents, energy industry, the traders, offshore industry, exporters, importers, and indeed every citizen of our country. So in our journey into the future, there will be challenges as well as concurrent opportunities. And in my talk today, I'll highlight the security challenges that we face in the maritime domain, as well as the Indian Navy's lines of effort in tackling these challenges to harness the associated opportunities. So before elaborating on the challenges, let me first briefly dwell upon the maritime domain itself. It is far different from the terra firma that we live on, because unlike land, nobody lives on the ocean. The oceans are largely uncontrolled, unowned, and unregulated global commons. Uncontrolled because 70% is covered of the Earth is covered by oceans, and 85% of the world's nations have access to the seas. And yet, the inherent fluidity of the seas means that one cannot seize or hold it or occupy these vast waters. Essentially, they remain free, therefore. And the United Nations Conventions on the Law of the Sea 1982 provides clarity on jurisdictions and permissible activities upon the seas. However, the traditional and enduring principle of freedom of the seas limits absolute control by any one entity. So these uncontrolled seas are also largely unowned. Only about 5% of the seas, being territorial seas, are governed by the laws of the land, while the remaining 95% are free for navigation and overflight. So in terms of owning the resources, nearly 90% of the seas by volume and 64% by surface area are beyond the exclusive economic zones and therefore beyond any state's jurisdiction. So this results in a cognitive dissonance towards comprehending the difference between the concept of sovereignty and right of a state on land vis-a-vis at sea. On land, we understand very clearly what is sovereignty. That is, there are borders, everything within that belongs to us. We have sovereign rights and so on, the airspace above it, and etc. But when it comes to the sea, there is a subtle difference because there is freedom of navigation, right of innocent passage. All this are associated in our EZ and even in our territorial waters. So therefore, understanding this concept of sovereignty as it applies to the seas is something that requires a little bit of thought. So this lack of legal ownership translates into the seas remaining largely unregulated as well. Their vastness associated by the tyranny of distance, because it takes a certain amount of time to go from one port to another. It implies that the seas cannot be organized or governed to any significant distance from the land. Just to highlight the complexity of the problem, I just want to say that a ship which is built in one country, owned by a person from another country, hired by a third country, using the flag of convenience of another entirely different country, is crewed by multinational national personnel, operated by some other nation, carrying cargo for a multitude of personnel of receivers, and transshipped through diverse parts in different countries. So you find that it is quite a maze when it comes to the issues related to ships and shipping and the maritime domain. These distinct characteristics, in turn, contribute to the oceans being a global commons, free for all to access, navigate, and utilize in pursuit of respective interests. So, being the global commons, the oceans also provide unfettered reach and access to the nation states, and therefore they are a medium of choice for power projection. And this brings with it an element of competition in the maritime domain. However, since individual state capacities significantly dwarf the capacity that is required because of the immense potential of the seas in terms of natural resources, trade, connectivity, etc., there is a tendency for nations to cooperate, to come together. And also, many of these challenges are transnational. It is not limited to just any one nation. For example, if you look at piracy, armed robbery, drug smuggling, as well as natural disasters, climate change, they all are multinational activities and they foster convergence between nations, navies, and maritime security agencies. Thus, there is also an inherent element of cooperation that the oceans offer. So, as a consequence of these elements of competition and cooperation, the states consider it prudent to ensure that there is free and full use of the seas as it allows furthering of their own economic and strategic interests. So the maritime domain, with its nature of being uncontrolled, unowned, unregulated, global commons, is unique in many ways. So with this as a background, let me now dwell upon India's maritime security challenges. I view the contemporary and future maritime security challenges through an interconnected trinity of eyes. Three eyes, I would say: imperatives at home, influences from outside, and intrusive paradigms, which have an impact across all spheres of cooperation, competition, as well as our day-to-day life. So beginning with the imperatives at home, the primary imperative for the Indian Navy is to protect our national interests in the maritime domain against inimical action by adversarial actors across the entire spectrum of conflict, as well as below the threshold of conflict. Concomitantly and equally importantly, there is a need to ensure safe and secure seas to catalyze economic growth and prosperity. So in order to meet these imperatives, there are numerous challenges, but I will dwell only upon three notable aspects, namely the military, the economic, and organizational. Firstly, the military challenges. India's security drivers have evolved in complexity over recent years. The international order is undoubtedly undergoing a rapid transformation. Multilateralism is on the decline. Global institutions are losing their effectiveness. Great power competition is unfolding. And as an accompanying effect, the global commons are increasingly becoming contested domains, be it the oceans, be it space, be it cyber. And in this contestation, credible military power remains a crucial lever for protecting our national interests and expanding our strategic footprint. So in this, the Indian Navy plays an important role given the predominantly maritime character of our region, which is the Indo-Pacific. So we closely monitor trends and patterns of threats and challenges from traditional as well as non-traditional sources capable of impacting the maritime domain. So traditionally, India continues to face challenges posed by state actors across multiple spheres, including in the maritime domain. So while competition at sea is played out almost on a daily basis, at times testing limits, but without escalating into armed action, a war with potential adversaries can never be ruled out. Hence, the vital need to remain poised and prepared for such an eventuality while working hard to deter such a possibility. On the other hand, in the recent years, non-traditional security threats such as maritime terrorism, piracy, armed robbery, illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing, human and arms and drugs trafficking, etc., have added a fresh paradigm to the security scenario. So, maritime terrorism has expanded in recent years and is manifesting in new ways and means. Piracy and armed robbery at sea also remain a significant threat to international shipping and seafarers. Right now, we see it quite subdued because of the effect of a large number of multinational maritime forces being present in the area. The constant challenge of unregulated activities and inherent limitation in the maritime domain awareness poses a significant challenge as they could enable other threats. There have also been more instances of natural disasters and regional instabilities over the past decade, necessitating increased deployment for the Indian Navy towards HIDR operations and non-combatant evacuation operations. So all of these challenges, both traditional and non-traditional, remain interrelated and together form a web of threats, coexisting and sometimes supporting each other. So navigating through these challenges is a primary concern right now and will remain so for the foreseeable future. Which brings me to the economic imperatives and challenges therein. Since 2015, India has moved from the 10th to the 5th place in terms of the size of our economy. And we are knocking at the doors of Germany to be the 4th largest economy in the world, maybe by the next year end. India's GDP is $3.5 trillion today, and by some estimates, it could surpass $26 trillion mark by 2047, a nearly 8-fold increase. So concurrently, our exports are also growing. So in 2021-22, India's merchandise export was a record $422 billion, and in the current financial year, it had crossed $332 billion till last December. And there is an expected growth of about 17.83%. It is clear, therefore, that an export-based economy will be a prime mover for achieving the goal of becoming a fully developed nation by 2047. Here I would like to draw your attention to two books, A Splendid Exchange by William Bernstein and To Rule the Waves by Bruce D. Jones. Both these must-reads highlight the importance of trade or port-led development in global commerce. Quoting examples from prehistoric era, highlighting India's share of the GDP up to the 16th century, as well as articulating the maritime trade-based growth of Europe, UK, US, and China. And now probably it is our turn. It also elaborates the myriad crises confronting the global commerce today. Therefore, the aspects of commerce or port-led development and blue economy have and will continue to play a pivotal role in enhancing our national growth potential. And vast volumes of our exports inevitably will be facilitated by the seas. With 95% of India's trade by volume and 68% by value being seaborne, the free access to ports and secure sea lanes remain crucial to our economic well-being. The seas, in comparison to road and rail, continue to be the most economic means of transportation and will continue to remain so unless we come across some new technology like quantum transportation. So it provides an efficiency ratio, I would say, of road to rail to sea as 1:10:100. That is, for the same amount of energy, we can transport about 250 kgs by road, 2,500 kgs by rail, and 25,000 kgs by sea. So that is the scale of efficiency that you achieve when you move by sea. And catalyzed by the seas, India's expanding economy mandates security of our interests across a significantly wider geography, most of which is accessible largely by the oceans. To quote Admiral Alfred Thayer Mahan on the subject, he said that the necessity of a navy, in the restricted sense of the word, springs therefore from the existence of peaceful shipping and disappears with it, except in the case of a nation which has aggressive tendencies and keeps up a navy merely as a branch of the military establishment. This was is a quote which I took out from The Influence of Sea Power Upon History, written by him. So another related aspect which starkly underscores the ongoing conflict in Europe is a continued dependence on external sources. The last few months have been a clear reaffirmation of the inescapable need for Atmanirbharta to be pursued in letter and spirit. So we as a nation envision to be the manufacturing center of the world, and in that endeavor, our ports will be the hub of all maritime activity. However, there's one aspect in which we are lagging behind quite drastically. We do not have even one port in the first 25 busiest ports of the world, whereas China has 5 in the first 10. So there is something which need to work upon, and we need to develop our ports and develop the connectivity and the infrastructure. So I'll be covering this aspect of Atmanirbharta a little later. Effectively addressing these economic imperatives will require organizational strength, efficiency, and synergy. So this brings me to the third imperative at home, which is organization. So having recognized the need to reimagine the conduct of business of war, the armed forces have set themselves on the path of reorganizing and reorienting for the future. Establishment of the DMA, appointment of the CDS, the Agnipath, theaterization, integration, etc. They're all steps in the correct direction. However, notwithstanding continued evolution of the services and the overall national security architecture, I must say that silos still exist. The imperative is to overcome turf protection tendencies as well as organizational inertia to change. And in doing this, it is important for the Navy and the services to get our act right as we transit to new organizational structures. Time is at a premium and we will need to move fast. So just like for any policy, it is not just the intention, but also thoroughness and efficient implementation that counts. Getting the organizational changes right will be the vital aspect to reap the desired benefits of jointness and integration. So having spoken about home, let me also speak about away or the next I, which is influences from outside, by which I allude to the external issues impacting our interests. Primary among these is the increased centrality of the Indo-Pacific in the global geostrategic calculus. A large number of countries have come out with the Indo-Pacific strategy, and many of them do not belong to the region as well. Indo-Pacific as a geostrategic reality is also accompanied by a return of great power competition. The US-China rivalry is here to stay, and it is not a short sprint, but I feel a long marathon that they are engaged in. This has led inevitably to a naval arms race between the West and China, quite similar perhaps to the pre-World War I era between the Allied and the Central Powers. For instance, China has inducted 148 warships over the last 10 years, which is, I would say, is perhaps nearly the entire Indian Navy's size, and the process still continues. So this arms race has made our resource-rich region an arena for jostling for influence, markets, resources, and energy, among others. So notwithstanding this jostling, the intricately interwoven and interdependent metrics of economic relations also mandates a certain level of cooperation among these very states. This simultaneous competition and cooperation accentuates the complexities of security. While much has been said of the ongoing conflict in Europe, the fact that despite extensive sanctions by the West on Russia, most of Europe continues to receive Russian energy underscores that even during conflicts, it is unlikely that states can be completely devoid of mutual dependencies. Climate change, too, is affecting our strategic calculus, be it melting of the Arctic or rising sea levels, threatening livelihoods of islands and littorals. Climate change challenges will impact the global interactions in the days ahead. It may, in fact, emerge as a major security challenge in our calculus. Amidst these influences from outside, driven by the churn in the Indo-Pacific and Europe, it will be a challenge to identify our own strategic space, create opportunities for engagement and partnership, and balance relationships in the emerging complicated metrics of competitors, friends, and partners. However, military power alone will be grossly insufficient, as this competition will transcend multiple domains encompassing not just the physical but also the digital and cognitive domains. And that brings me to the third I, which is intrusive paradigms. We are witnessing the rise of certain all-encompassing, all-pervasive, all-impacting, or in one word, intrusive paradigms. And these impose a unique set of challenges. The first paradigm is the one encompassing rapid technological advancements across various fields such as AI, machine learning, hypersonics, genetics, quantum, communications, laser, and so on. And these create new capabilities with the prospect of delivering effects disproportionate to their cost. So these offer a wide array of options in both military and civil domains. So developments like the ChatGPT are only an indicator of the immense potential that technological advancements bear. And these also provide nations with a broader spectrum of dissuasive, deterrent, and coercive tools below the level of visible kinetic action. Such options are emerging as a preferred choice for states to achieve strategic effects. Equally, such capabilities are also available to non-state actors, terror organizations, drugs and arms running syndicates, and the like, with a multitude of new and maybe yet unknown options. An intersecting paradigm is the changing techscape that is cyber. It has permeated all spheres of our lives, ranging from meeting our daily requirements to governance and warfighting. Cyber is everywhere. It provides inimical actors freedom of action, non-attributability, and near perfect invisibility in cyberspace. Balancing cyber dependencies with inherent security challenges will continue to retain primacy in our calculus as well. So intrinsically linked with all our activities is the cognitive domain, and while gaining ascendancy in this domain has always been important, what has changed is the velocity of reach through social and digital media, which makes it even more critical. Today, it works at the speed of light, unlike yesteryears. So in our context, the adversaries can exploit our open and liberal society to attack attack the core of a nation by challenging our constitutional values. So our challenge is therefore to declutter the noise across the strata of national and military leadership, and equally importantly for the common man. Thus the three I's, that is imperatives at home, influences from outside, and intrusive paradigms, and their different manifestations define our primary security challenges in the maritime domain. So while these challenges have and will always exist, the Indian Navy stands ready to safeguard and promote India's security and national interests. And towards this, the Navy's efforts are aimed at adding value to the holistic national security apparatus, both figuratively and literally. And this is how we act as the principal manifestation of India's maritime power. So the word value as an acronym quite simply breaks down as V for vision, A for assurance, L for leveraging Atmanirbharta, U as a uniting force, and E as an engagement. I will cover each of these subsequently. The V in value alludes to the vision for the oceans. If the Indian Navy is to secure India's national interests, safe and secure seas become imperative. So given the expanse of the Indian Ocean region, which is 20 times the landmass of India, and this is just the IOR, not the Indo-Pacific, we recognize that no one can do it alone. Therefore, there's a need to collaborate with like-minded partners. So in this endeavor, the Navy is guided by the nation's intrinsically inclusive vision called Saga, meaning oceans, and expands as security and growth for all in the region. It envisages that all of us in the region will grow, prosper, and develop together in a secure environment framed by mutual convergences. The values underpinning this vision encompass what we call the 5 S's, that is Saman, Samvad, Shanti, Samriddhi, and notably Sahyog or cooperation. So guided by this, the Indian Navy's vision is to remain a combat-ready, credible, cohesive, and future-proof force in service of the nation. By combat-ready, the focus is on ordnance centricity, the roadworthiness of assets, training of personnel, the morale as concurrent enablers, realistic exercises, high tempo of operations, and a balanced, multi-dimensional network force that can operate effectively across the entire spectrum. And coming to credibility, this is pursued through ensuring enhanced reach, sustenance, footprint, and familiarization of our areas of interest, forward posture, and prompt and assured response to any situation. So our sustained mission-based deployments across the vast oceans enable us to tackle any contingency, be it domestic or international, with alacrity and reliability. This is also complementary to our endeavor of being the first responder and preferred security partner for our friends and partners in the region. And in terms of being a cohesive force, our approach is two-pronged. Internally, we aim to remain a well-knit and motivated team, sustained across hierarchical engagement, continued professional upskilling, regularly evolving and outcome-oriented training, encouraging innovation, recognizing and rewarding excellence, and a clear-eyed focus on happy personnel. All this underscored by a single-minded outlook of keeping our ships, submarines, and aircraft foremost in all our endeavors. Further, the Navy has laid down plans to induct women across all ranks and roles. This will ensure that we are able to maximize the rich demographic dividend on offer. I can proudly say that the Navy encourages Nari Shakti through advocating and practicing women empowerment. Moreover, women are also uh, already undertaking diverse roles and shouldering responsibilities, including combat roles. So, as I speak, there are 33 women officers who are posted on board our frontline warships and 273 women Agniveers undergoing training at INS Chilka for the first time. Externally, our efforts are aimed at establishing and enhancing trust with stakeholders across the domestic and international canvas. And domestically, we are closely enmeshed with the multitude of agencies involved in the maritime domain. This straddles a vast canvas across numerous sectors such as security, technology, shipping, ports, trade, shipbuilding, fisheries, industry, to name just a few. Internationally, we engage regularly with friends and partners to develop interoperability and trust. And towards this, joint surveillance of the exclusive economic zones as well as coordinated patrols with friendly foreign countries have helped us secure the region against a range of maritime security threats. As far as being future-proof is concerned, the focus is on the long view, by which I mean transformational changes which will instill agility and strengthen our organizations to withstand the shocks of today as well as those of tomorrow. Towards this end, we seek to innovate and evolve mechanisms that foster development and incorporation of niche technologies at a rapid pace. Our approach is to adopt an exponential thinking rather than the traditional linear one, and therefore pole vault instead of leapfrog the technology curve. Accordingly, the IN has established the Naval Innovation and Indigenization Organization, which looks at emerging technological trends for implementation in the Navy. Another significant step towards being future-proof is the recently introduced Agnipath scheme. And today, our society and our nation are poised at the cusp of becoming the world's largest population and, more importantly, being endowed with a youthful demography in the coming decades. There is an abundant opportunity through Agnipath to tap into the abundant pool of vibrant and exuberant youth to make our forces younger, nimbler, more tech savvy, and more effective. So, while this is a transformational initiative for the armed forces, it will also play a vital role in the growth, prosperity, and transformation of a nation. As a steady stream of trained, disciplined, and motivated young Agniveers, having completed their service, joined the national workforce, the benefits to society and country will become evident through their contribution to nation building. In pursuance of our vision, the Indian Navy understands its responsibility to provide assurance and build trust with the friendly nations. This assurance is the A in the word value. So, assurance and trust are the central pillars on which our engagements with friends and partners stand firmly. And one prime example of India's endeavors in this regard are the mission-based deployments, which I mentioned earlier. It has accrued three advantages. We remain poised for rapid operations in a contingency. It increases our familiarity with our area of operations. And third, it assures friendly nations that we are ready to assist when called upon, thereby building our credibility as a maritime power. So while we deploy to distant locations, we also continue to be proactive in rendering humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. Look at our COVID response, for instance. You must have witnessed India's extensive outreach to the regions in terms of vaccines, medicines, protective equipment, trained personnel, so on, even during our times of need. Equally, our friends in the region too reciprocated by sharing their resources such as liquid oxygen, oxygen cylinders, etc., when we needed them the most. And I would say that these are enduring examples of assurance and trust. This assurance and trust has been further strengthened by the fact that we are fast becoming Atmanirbhar or self-reliant to a large extent in our defense capabilities, especially with regard to shipbuilding. So while this has a positive impact on military preparedness of the Indian Armed Forces, it also has positive connotations for the region as a whole. And this is how leveraging Atmanirbharta, the L in value, or latest evolution of Atmanirbharta, has been the maiden operation of the LCA Navy on board INS Vikrant. Though we could call it as just another landing and takeoff, we have to understand its significance. The landing of an indigenous aircraft by an Indian pilot trained in India on an indigenous aircraft carrier designed in India in Indian waters is a real testimony to our nation's progress towards Atmanirbharta. Very few countries in the world are capable of achieving this. And not just that, the entire content in construction of Vikrant is close to 76% indigenous content, which includes the ship's indigenous steel DMR 249, which has been made in India in collaboration with DRDO, with Midani and SAIL, along with the Indian Navy. The indigenous construction of the carrier also generated employment opportunities and bolstered the plowback effect on the domestic economy. Close to 2,000 shipyard workers and 13,000 non-yard personnel, that is, personnel working in the MSMEs and other ancillary industries, were employed on a yearly basis towards construction of Vikrant, thus providing the estimated shipbuilding employment multiplier effect of 6.4. So Vikrant is a shining example of aspirational and Atmanirbhar Bharat, and will proudly fly our Tiranga across the far reaches of the world for decades to come. It will be an icon of national pride, national strength, national resolve, and national inspiration. So, in terms of strengthening our indigenous industry, the Indian Navy has been a major contributor to the rise of the Indian shipbuilding industry. This is underpinned by the Navy's single-minded focus on transforming itself from a buyer's Navy in 1947 to a builder's Navy. It is said that you cannot buy a Navy, you have to build it. So today there are 41 out of 43 ships and submarines ordered by the Navy under construction in Indian shipyards. And apart from Indian naval ships, warships from friendly foreign countries have begun utilizing Indian shipyards and naval dockyards for repair and refit of their platforms, which has enhanced the prospect of a export-driven Indian shipbuilding industry. For instance, one of the US Navy's dry cargo ship, USNS Charles Drew, undertook repairs at the Kattupalli shipyard last year. And today, the USNS Matthew Perry entered L&T shipyard Kattupalli again for voyage repairs from 11th to 29th March of this month. So we see the growing use of our shipyards by friendly foreign countries for repairs, refits, and so on. Fiscally, the Indian Navy has always endeavored to reinvest a large share of its budget back into the Indian economy. Some of you may have already read the recently released Economic Survey 2022-23, which highlights and acknowledges the Navy's contribution to this aspect. It states that every rupee spent on shipbuilding triggers circulation of 1.82 rupees. Therefore, the Navy's current order book worth 1.5 lakh crores will result in circulation of nearly 2.73 lakh crores in the shipbuilding sector as a whole. So our endeavors towards Atmanirbharta are not just limited to shipbuilding. Indian Navy's efforts have yielded fruitful outcomes towards development of niche systems such as electronic warfare suits, sonars, weapons, sensors, machinery systems, with nearly 3,000 systems and subsystems being indigenized. There are many other success stories pertaining to Atmanirbharta and defense, which highlight the immense potential of the Indian defense sector. For instance, BrahMos, the supersonic cruise missile, which is now being exported, and the fighter aircraft Tejas, for which an increasing number of countries are interested, point to a prospective profitability of indigenous defense production ventures. And the nation has set itself a clear goal, that of becoming a developed nation by 2047. And as a corollary, the Navy at 2047 must be the reflection of a confident nation, a strong nation, an aspirational nation. And therefore, The Navy will be a fully Atmanirbhar force by the 100th anniversary of India's independence. And this is a commitment we in the Navy have made to our national leadership, and we are confident that we'll get there. And Atmanirbhar Indian Navy also plays the role of a uniting force in the region, the U in value. We recognize our responsibility to be the pillar around which a combined force for good could be built. We work alongside like-minded nations, harnessing the issue-based convergences. And towards this, at the strategic level, we are actively pursuing initiatives under the ambit of the MEA, such as the Act East policy, ASEAN, ADMM+, IORA, IOC, IPOI, and the Djibouti Code of Conduct. These initiatives provide the necessary framework for meaningful and constructive dialogue and also form the basis for enhancing the Navy's engagements with like-minded maritime nations. At the operation level, initiatives such as standing arrangements for faster operational turnaround of assets, logistic agreements for better interoperability, and operation of surface assets and air assets from each other's bases and access facilities. All this help to improve interoperability, enhance security, and reaffirm our commitment to be the first port of call for our friendly maritime nations in the Indo-Pacific. In addition, forging collaborative frameworks such as IONS, the Goa Maritime Conclave, and Milan form an important element of our commitment to the region. The Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, or IONS, is one such framework which is only 14 years old, yet it has achieved significant strides in promoting collaborative engagements in the IOR. Similarly, the Goa Maritime Conclave, or GMC in short, promotes a constructive and outcome-oriented dialogue among our neighborhood navies. Another such initiative is Milan, a biennial multilateral exercise initiated by the Navy in 1995, which has grown in stature over the years. The last edition in February 2022 witnessed the largest ever participation with more than 40 navies coming together to enhance maritime cooperation and build interoperability at sea. So while the Navy is pursuing these multiple lines of effort externally, I'm also quite clear that our efforts to be a uniting force will need to remain focused internally as well. The vision of combat readiness, credibility, cohesiveness, and future-proofing cannot be achieved by the Navy alone. A significant driver in this pursuit will be the synergy and jointness amongst the three services. Joint efforts leading to joint outcomes and driven by a common purpose will be instrumental in preparing us for tomorrow's battlefield. The Navy remains a proponent of fostering tri-service synergy across various spheres, be it operations, leveraging and optimizing each other's resources, integration of operational networks, inventory management, joint acquisitions, capacity enhancements, etc., which will all augur well for our collective future. So through these initiatives, the Indian Navy acts as a uniting force for bringing friends together to exchange views and address common concerns for a holistic maritime security. So it very simply means partners coming together, having an equal seat at the table and pooling resources to leverage what each can bring to bear. And it is through these endeavors that confidence in each other is built surely but steadily. The four pillars that I spoke of so far, the vision, assurance, leveraging Atmanirbharta, and uniting force, manifest as enhanced engagements with friendly maritime security forces, the last pillar of Indian Navy's value to the Indo-Pacific engagements. Our engagements in the region straddle multiple lines of efforts focused on a broad trinity of remaining the preferred security partner and first responder, while concurrently enabling collective maritime competence. So towards being a preferred security partner, our engagements are based on a shared goal of enhancing the region's maritime security quotient. And in this endeavor, the Navy's persistent presence and preparedness across our areas of interest is a critical enabler in addressing shared security challenges. And as regards being the first responder, We have remained at the forefront in providing assistance over a wide spectrum of situations, including those related to natural disasters, medical emergencies, critical technical situations, and incident responses, amongst numerous others. Our swift and timely response is enabled by the flexibility, mobility, and reach inherent to naval forces in general and the Indian Navy in particular, given our force structures and deployments. And coming to collective maritime competence, we understand that each navy or nation in the Indo-Pacific brings certain unique capacities and capabilities to the table. Expertise, intelligence, technology, geographical locations, and assets. So we harness these to tackle common challenges together by creating a participative, inclusive ecosystem rather than a prohibitive and elitist one. So while the Navy is pursuing multiple lines of effort, I'm also quite clear that holistic maritime security cannot be achieved by our Navy alone. So navigating the turbulent and unpredictable tides of the present and the ambiguities of the future can no longer be a single service or indeed even a joint service endeavor. The Honorable Prime Minister also alluded to the effort during his address at the Swavalambhan seminar in July last year. And I quote him, "The collective national consciousness of various people of India is the strong basis of security and prosperity," unquote. The present demands thus a whole of government approach, and the focused national efforts today in this regard are quite evident. And going beyond this, the future will also impose an inescapable need for a whole of society approach, towards which I think we are moving gradually. Collectively, we would need to remain persistent and patient in our efforts while ensuring regular presence in our areas of interest. I have every confidence that while we retain the ability to counter every challenge today, our abilities to address the challenges of the future will be even greater together. So with that, I conclude my talk and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Admiral Hari Kumar, for that very comprehensive view of the maritime environment. And I think most important, your 5 pillars of which provide a framework for Indian Navy's functioning. And this is the value, I think, vision, assurance, leveraging Atmanirbharta, uniting force, and engagement. I think they're all very comprehensive in each area. I think a lot of work is being done. Now, of course, at the same time, the security environment is also